And hopefully that means
Maybe.
There we go.
There we
All
are.
right.
we are live for real this time.
Welcome, my friends, to Live Coding Happy Hour End of the Year edition. This is the last one of the year. This is December 21st, 2018. I'm Dave Slusher, joined with my colleagues Andrew Barnes and Chuck Tomasi. So what we're going to do this time is we're going to do less of a single problem deep dive. We're going to do kind of just a summation. We'll talk a little about the projects that we worked on. We'll kind of talk about what's happening with them in production. I'll do a little bit of show and tell. You guys are both free to show and tell if you so desire. But first, let's do our introductions. Andrew.
All right. Hello, I'm Andrew Barnes, developer advocate at ServiceNow. I've been with the company for almost a whopping 4 months, but I've been on the platform for a little over 4 years now. I've been a customer a couple of times, an implementation partner for ridiculously large companies, and then now at ServiceNow. We are part of the developer program, which is what runs developer.servicenow.com. Awesome place to get your PDIs, and I am super excited for our last session, even with all of the starting issues. To Chuck.
Hi, my name is Chuck Tomasi from ServiceNow. I've been with the company for about 8.5 years. Actually, I think the count is 3,119 days today, but who's counting? I was a customer for a couple of years before that. My time in ServiceNow has been mainly around the platform, integrations, doing professional services enablement, solution consulting, and you get the picture. It goes from there. It's just, it's been a real rocket ride and a whole lot of fun. And it has been a wonderful 2018. Looking forward to 2019.
All right. And I'm Dave Slusher, developer advocate with the ServiceNow developer program. We just celebrated 5-year anniversary, myself and Josh Nereus, who did in fact start on the same day. We were originally all with Chuck in professional services a long time ago. And developer.servicenow.com, as Andrew said. Now let us go around the horn. I've got 3 beers here. I don't have my handy.
Someone's celebrating early.
Well, it's going to be a happy holiday there.
We're going to crowdsource this. So actually, I'll start with my 3 choices. So I have the Sam Adams Chocolate Bock, which I think I may have had a few weeks ago on here.
Mm-hmm.
I've got the from Asheville. I've got the Highland Gaelic Ale.
Oh, that is a good one.
And I've got the O'Shea's Irish Stout. So I'm putting this to the chat room and to you two. Place your vote, and I will open the one that gets the most votes.
Hard to go wrong there, but I think you're going to like the first one the best. So my vote was for the chocolate stout. It's a good chocolate stout day for me. That's my vote.
Okay. We've got one from
Chuck.
One from Andrew. What are you drinking, Chuck?
I can't make a unanimous vote. This is not in my nature. I'm gonna go for the O'Shea's.
Okay, there you go.
And Jared votes for the Highland Gaelic.
There's one each.
It's gonna be a 3-way tie. All right.
So it's
drink all 3.
It's back to the executive decider then.
All right. Well, you two go do your beers, and I'll decide about it.
So I have a very Christmas labeled beer today. I have a very bad elf, which is it says special reserve ale, and I couldn't really see the brewer. Ridgeway Brewing, and I can't read any smaller than that.
All right. I've got the Leinenkugel's original beer. This is from the multi-pack that I had a few weeks ago. So I'm making my way through. I don't think I've had this one yet. This is a very crisp, clean lager from Leinenkugel's in Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I think last year for the live code at the holiday season, I had the there's like 5 of these bad elf varieties mixed with a bad Santa as like a black and tan.
Interesting.
It was amazingly good. That was a lot of beer for that show. 3 really good. So as Dave said, we're going to, not do tons of coding, if very much at all today. We're going to show off some of the things we did. We're going to highlight some things, and uh, we're just going to have fun with it. I mean, it's the last show of the year. We've got the holiday tree behind me. Dave's got his holiday green screen behind him, and Chuck is representing his state.
This is how Christmas looks in Phoenix. I'm just
Yeah, I was going to get on the green screen game, but I think my Christmas tree is my backdrop until I put it away.
Is that actual snow outside?
No, there's no actual snow outside anymore.
Okay.
It's all
It's just
melted away. That's just rain.
Okay. The
We are
window
in
is
North
sort of
Carolina. There's
out.
not a lot of that snow very often.
Gotcha.
All right. I don't see anything subsequent in the chat. So
I don't either. So what's your decision on the beer?
I'm going with the Gaelic Ale.
All right.
Here we go. Boom. Gaelic Ale it is. All right. Do either of you guys want to share first? Do you have anything you want to share? If
I
not,
can follow up on what we were building last week.
Sure,
I mean,
absolutely.
Get some time in. It was a crazy Monday night. Things around the Tomasi household were coding left and right. So let me do a quick screen share here. Stop the video and share. Oh, it's one of these two screens. Desktop 1, I believe it is. I'll do a share. So this is my, you see that?
Yes.
I hope. Okay. I had written a new scope in my Hue app. So in Studio, when we left off last week, we did the integration hub spoke to do the go out and get the sunrise, sunset, and set a couple of events. So those two events have been going in at the proper times a day into using the gs.event queue scheduled method to put those in. And I'll tell you a little bit of troubleshooting that I just got resolved last night. So, Monday night, I wrote this out and I said, I need, what is it that I get from the Hue API? And you can find this very easy to see if I can find it in here. The hub has itself a little debug tool. So it's got almost like a REST API Explorer kind of thing going on. And you get a new key. I'm not going to go through the whole Hue thing, but you get a key, you make a user ID, and then that goes into your URL almost as a token. And I believe I used new developer, and you say lights and do a get, and it should tell you unauthorized user. Darn it. I have a whole new key in there, but you get the idea that when you pass it this, you'll get this. And to change the state of a bulb, you do a put to change the state or the color if it's a color setup. Anyway, I said, well, now that I know that, I should go get a list of all my lights. So let's save those in the lights table. And I'll tell you, the data you get back from this API is nuts. I mean, it's got the firmware revision on every bulb. It's got tons and tons of stuff. The only thing I really wanted was the ID and the name so that I could do this name to conversion ratio. Because in the URL, when you want to turn light number 5 on, well, I call light number 5 left bedside. And, there's over TV setup. And so I wanted to address these by name. My ultimate goal was to have the script action that was reacting to my sunrise and sunset events to look like this. Go turn the left bedside light on using my REST script include. That was my goal.
That seems sensible.
As simple as possible. I want my own simple API. But to get there, I sort of had to run around the block a couple of times. So the basis of all this stuff is I use some properties in here. Probably not the best idea when you're dealing with, tokens and security and whatnot, but I threw this together in about an hour. It wasn't too difficult. My simple REST message API is durable enough to take a method. Do you want to do a get, a put, a patch, a post, that kind of thing? The action, which will be embedded into the URL, and then the payload, should it be a put or a post. So that was really all I did, is I strung this URL together in the format that Hue was looking for, or Phillips, whoever they're talking to. And I am going through a mid server. So you give it the name of the mid server. And I have a mid server set up on the Raspberry Pi. We talked a little bit about that at the end of the last show. So it is going through the mid server, and the response time is actually quicker than I expected. Because when the event comes up, within like 2 or 3 seconds, that light is on or off. And I thought that was surprising. And even I should probably be checking if I have a payload, but hey, it seems to be working fine with null. And then if I get a 200 back, meaning everything worked out okay, then I send the response body back because I want the body when I get a list of bulbs. There's really nothing of importance when you just say, turn the light on, turn the light off. So right now it's in a very fundamental mode. And then to say light on, which is how you saw it in the script action, light on calls set light state. And because light on and light off were so close to being exactly the same, I just abstracted the code out one other layer so I can just set the light state.
So what did you learn interesting like along the way here? Like how did you fail in a fun way?
How did I fail in a fun way? Exactly what I told you guys at the last show to watch out for. The script action defaults to false, active false. That's what took me till Wednesday night to verify, and then Thursday night it came on by itself. Like, is that all? I thought it was something in my code. I was running this same stupid one-liner script from script's background. Hey, look, the light came on. What is possibly going on? The event is there. The event is queued. The event triggers at the right time. Why? Oh my gosh, the active flag was off. So I got caught by my own warning. That was even more embarrassing. And now that I'm admitting it, so there you go.
All right.
The API was surprisingly simple to put together. It's well documented, as we mentioned. Some vendors are documenting well and some aren't. I still don't know how they're accessing this from outside the outside of my firewall, outside my ecosystem. There must be some interplay between the hub and Philips corporate where Alexa and whatever else are talking to each other. So this is my workaround, and now I have a way to trigger my Philips lights at sunset and sunrise because Alexa won't do that for me.
Nice. And I'm going to use the same function process to, but instead of doing a sunset, a scheduled time.
Yep.
I'll use that the webhook from Zoom to say I'm in a conference.
Yes.
To create the event, which will then do all of the same action. So all of this.
The use case here is brilliant. I mean, you can use any mid server in your organization, but the customer use case I see is any type of event you want to trigger, you can throw into the event queue, whether it's scheduled or on demand, left, right, center. I'm sure somebody's published one of these Hue interfaces much better than this. I mean, I'm doing very, very rudimentary error checking on any of this stuff. So feel free to bulk it up. I'll put it in a GitHub repo under my GitHub Chuck Tomasi account. If you want to take it apart, it'll be like ServiceNow Hue or ServiceNow Philips.
I'll be playing around with that next week when I'm on vacation.
Yeah, bulk it up. It's meant to be fairly standalone. The only thing that is relying on that the Nexus event, but you don't have to.
But I'll be generating my own event and
exactly use it as an example. Go forward. Again, it was thrown together pretty fast. Most of the lightning round was spent on just what parameters do I need in this REST message and how do I pass them in effectively. I'm sure there's an extension you could make quite easily to set the hue color. This should be robust enough to hold up to all of those because you're just setting in either a different payload or a different action or payload, and then adding on little very specific functions down here to do that. Here's get light ID. So I can call it by name and get that 5 or 4 or 3 or whatever it is out of there. Update the light list. Go ahead and get the light list. If you got a good list, delete the existing one and create a new list. Boom, you've got your name to ID recognition. If you want to store more information, go extend that table and say, this is this firmware version and all that good other stuff that you want. So I
think what I'll do when I'm building this is instead of this script include for all the functions and messaging, I think I'll turn it into Spoke.
I thought about that, and just the way that it's architected, I'd be curious to see how you do that. Let me know.
You think there's some bumps along that road? That's fine.
It felt like
I want to hit the bumps.
Okay, good. It didn't feel like a smooth transition to me to go, I can do that faster and first. Although I probably should have given myself a better challenge to do that because I want to do more of these integrations as spokes, not as script includes. So I leave it for you to reference, and maybe we put both of them together and have one repo with either or.
That would be cool.
there's no reason why your custom actions can't be calls to your script include, REST steps that call your script include.
Correct.
I mean,
Yeah, it could be layered up like that.
that is like the dirtiest shim you could possibly do, is just make actions that just point to functions in the script include.
And I had a discussion with Josh Narius about that, and he said, if you're going to be starting from scratch, you shouldn't have done it the way I did, is basically what it came down to. But if you had legacy code and wanted to build a spoke, you could certainly do it that way.
Right. It gives that presentation layer to the user to be able to, build workflow for it. Which is nice.
Yeah, it does, but now I don't have, there are no credentials, so we don't need to worry about that. It's going to be similar to what we did with the sunrise sunset thing. But yeah, I look forward to seeing what you do with it.
Cool.
All right, now there is actually something the two of you maybe can kick around at some point, talking through. You've both now got two different use cases which are similar. And think about how could this be abstracted out? Would it make sense to create like a generic, like very high, very abstract thing, which is the notion of an IoT event and an IoT action, and then basically descend from that? Like, what if we started from the idea of we would create the most generic IoT type framework, and then just begin to build basically implementations of stuff, whether it's a Nest, whether it's a Hue, like if there were other actions, which the action may be change the RGB value of my light, right? Or whatever that action might be.
I think it would be implementation specific, because Hue has a whole different way of interfacing than, say, the TP-Link devices in my house. You go to the hub and the other. But I think I know where you're going, in that customer could use this for, say, a critical business service is down. We want the klaxons firing, something like that, where you've got somebody's attention via lights.
Well, effectively, kind of what I'm describing is kind of like a generic, basically like a plugin architecture, or like where you think like all the code that talks to any specific thing, and every one of them is going to be different. That is like, we are in the wild west of IoT, right? It is madness when you look at like things that look exactly the same, and then you look at the APIs for two things that do exactly the same thing, and they're nothing alike, right?
Exactly.
So essentially, you would have like a high-level abstract thing that from the ServiceNow end, you have like a consistent architecture, which is turn this thing on, and then under the hood, you would have all the specific stuff, which is essentially you'd have like a driver for that thing that you would plug in there. Just a possibility, like a thing to think about. Well, I also don't know. We know that there is an IoT project inside the company. Kind of a skunk's work, and I have no idea like where they're at, and if I don't know if that's what they do. I mean, no one knows.
Yeah, they've been running silent for almost a year now. I did have a brief discussion with Brian Barnard, and that should be interesting. We should be hearing some news from them later this year on that.
So that would be it is kind of I forget what I was just looking for. Was it Wemo? Or I was looking at some of the drivers for very similar stuff, and it is just madness.
Well, especially in the consumer world, but also in the enterprise world, which is mainly what they're working on, because we're dealing with maybe 20, 30 devices in our house. Think of an enterprise that's dealing with tens or hundreds of thousands of sensors that they're not all talking directly to ServiceNow, for example. They're going through collectors and pushers and brokers, and there's all kinds of different topology and infrastructure that goes with those things.
And here's what I've noticed, like, in just as you know, like you have some of those stun-off devices, right? And I have some. And so part of the fun is to find the absolute cheapest piece of crap device that will do something, which we've done. And with, like, the Sonos devices where you actually have to cut an extension cord and wire your own thing up.
That doesn't feel safe, does it?
I've actually got one in my daughter's room, and I was like, at first I was like, is this a good idea to put a thing that I wired myself? This might be a terrible idea. But so you've got that end, and then at the other end, you've got like a Wemo or something like that, which is more consumerized, but cost, may cost 10 times as much in some cases. Right. But there is a clear cutoff where you hit a point where under which there is no chance you're going to have any usable public And that is one thing you do get from the higher
the more
cost.
those consumer items definitely have way better consumer APIs that you can.
You're going to get an API from Philips. You're going to get it from Weibo.
Have one, yeah.
Yeah, you do not get it like the cheap. What our Christmas tree is currently getting turned on and off by this Mercury thing, which I had never heard of till I saw it at Walmart. Yeah. It was like $8 for a switch.
All right.
And like every kind of like Chinese OEM type switch, it's got an app. And now I have like the 7th app
to turn on and off a thing.
And I can connect it to Google Home, but there's no public generic app. And you'll notice too that same line is whether or not you have an IFTTT action. Because if they don't have a public API, IFTTT has nothing to use.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So that's kind of like the value differentiator in this world of like cheap devices.
Can I hook it up with my other things and use stuff like IFTT to do things with it? Yeah. Mm-hmm. How easy is it to live in a ecosystem or not and connect and make your life actually easier as opposed to finding where the switch is on your phone?
Now I'm going to tell you, Google Home has an opportunity that if Google Home exposed an API, they could now become the central authority for everything.
They could be the ServiceNow of home automation.
But then here's the downside of that is, do you want everything in your house depending on a Google project?
Yeah.
Because
those go away.
For those of you who use Google Plus or Google Wave or Google Buzz or Google News,
yeah.
So anyway,
right. You want to share your screen now, Dave?
Do you have something you want to show, Andrew? Or
no, I'm good for the moment.
Okay. All right. Let me share mine. And since I'm in this new house, there's a reason why I'm echoing the way I am, which is I'm in a new house that basically by myself in an empty room. So I apologize for the echo, but that is why I get this sweet ass green screen behind me. The whole room is painted like that, and everyone thinks I'm crazy in my family. But I could not believe when they saw this on the wall that that's actually what I wanted to do. And I realized, can I turn my camera off? Yes.
Yes.
Well, I'm shared. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Are you guys seeing the developer blog?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So the last time we did this, I confused myself. I'm actually looking at a screenshot of the credentials. All right. So we had worked with the posting of comments, or we had worked with the reading of comments, and we didn't actually have any interface to post it.
Oh yeah.
So I took that forward. In fact, the initial cut of this functionality was done in the Conway, South Carolina Public Library. My daughter was right next to me doing the Girls Who Code. And I was like, all right, it's Girls Who Code and Dads Who Code. And so I actually got this functionality working there. So there's still no CSS. As we were joking in my group that it took like 15 minutes to get comments working the last time we did this on Live Coding Happy Hour. And I spent 1 hour trying to get a line break in the CSS. And it wasn't working. So now what we've got is I've just picked a different post that I haven't used before. So I've got basically a client-side Java submission. I realized as I was testing this before that I'm not blanking this out on submit.
Okay.
And which I probably should. All I have to do is just go blank out that text area.
Yep.
I haven't got the CSS the way I want it, which is I want this under here, but it's not there. But it's in fact
there.
The data is there, and so it is. And you'll notice it is coming in as me, who is the user that's logged into this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we found out the hard way as I was trying to integrate this with our dev system that the login mechanism for the developer portal is in fact changing right now, is in flight changing. So I have to kind of freeze it right here, because one of the things that's happening now is, although I can post this, and you guys didn't see it because it happened before we went live, but I actually had to log in a second time because I'm requiring the post, you have to be logged in because you're doing basically a GS, get user ID.
Yeah.
From the session, which means the API needs you to be logged in.
Right.
So I could transfer that. What I want to do is to transfer that state via X user token, which I can do, but getting the X user token, it requires that authentication stuff that's changing on the developer portal right now.
Oh, okay.
So that's like a to-do. It was one of my goals before the holidays was to get this kind of finalized and working, but I actually put a pin in this because I'm not going to be able to finish this no matter what because of that. So that's kind of on ice until after the beginning of the year. But it's actually, we're down now to fixing the
CSS and clearing a field, right?
Clearing the field, and it's ready to go.
That's
so
pretty,
comments,
pretty close.
Comments will go on the dev blog early next year. And so that will be quite nice. There we go.
What's even funnier is you mentioned, being in the library and doing the, what was it? The Girls That Code event?
Girls That Code, yeah.
Yeah. So I used to do a sort of similar type event. Was called Girls on Track. Was a thing I was involved in. And yeah, just wait until a year or two from now, and she'll be helping you fix that problem as opposed to doing something else.
I sure hope so. And what I really hope is that she's really, really good at CSS.
Yes.
It's like, all right, honey, why don't you go learn this thing?
Compensate for both Andrew and Dave's areas of weakness.
CSS will be deprecated by the time she gets to it.
All right. So that was like a really quick coda to that, which we did. I don't remember how long ago we did, 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago.
And as a reminder, all that site is a ServiceNow instance. So
correct. That's why, like when you go to developer.servicenow.com, that's an instance. Everything where you manage your PDI and all that stuff, you're looking at an instance, and the blog is on the same instance.
Yep.
That's
the blog's on there. All of those instances are controlled by that. All of your personal developer instances are controlled by that instance.
All right. So then we'll talk a little bit about Travel Tracker, which, so I actually had to go back into the data. And I took some of Andrew's flights from his developer meetup worldwide tour, which I guess it wasn't worldwide, countrywide. I didn't bother because what happens in Travel Tracker is there's a scheduled script execution that will go through and something like 2 days after an itinerary closes, it'll mark all the flights inactive. I went back and actually set active to true so that the data will show back up. I did not put in your canceled flights or your ones that you didn't actually tape. So one of the things that I had done before, and let's look at the, where's the Travel Tracker overview? That's what I want to look at. So I had done the page and the service portal widget where I had done, where I had added this widget. Now, again, what I don't know is how to make this. I think maybe if I don't know how to make it
We
bigger.
were working on the maps and the faces.
Correct. And you'll notice that Andrew's face is in fact on there. I don't know how to make it. I don't know how to make the widget bigger. I got, I think, a little CSS problem in my page here. What I can do, if I hide the nav, I might make it a little bigger. Not much, not appreciative.
Yeah.
But one of the things that happens is that now actually these arrows are color coded.
Try the Command Plus thing, Dave.
Command Plus. Will this? Okay. All right. There you go. That's much better. Thank you. And so you'll see that this is, it's got his face on there. I did enough CSS magic on here to get the drop shadow, the white drop shadow around the words so that they're
I can actually
readable.
See GSO on there now. And
for the longest time on your picture and my picture, you couldn't tell because, it would wash out into whatever your picture was. But also, and somewhere in here, I need to put a legend on this, that like when we were looking at the flights, and some are upcoming and these are all arrived, they have different colors. Like a in-flight is red. I think let's see what upcoming is. So yeah. The arrows actually change color. The lines change color based on that. So you can read that. So these have all arrived. We'll see what the upcoming, so that's the upcoming flight. So this is some colleagues of ours who will be flying later in the year. And then these change, as things happen. So what I need to also do is figure out, I need to do whatever the user system in ServiceNow does, where it puts those your initials if you don't have the avatar. I should probably do something similar here. It doesn't, you'll notice that it's actually it's anchored to a different spot in the pin if it's not the picture. It basically is just it's a different fork over whether or not there's an avatar. It's going down a different branch. Yeah, it's going down a different branch if there is or is not an avatar. And so I may want to just put the initials, which would at least be helpful and tell you who it is, because right now that's the problem being solved with that whole other stuff is who I see there's a flight, but who is it?
Who is it?
And so this is, I like this a whole lot, but even when the people don't have an avatar in the system, I'd like to be able to do that. And we did show, I'm pretty sure, I don't know if we ever showed it in Live Coding Happy Hour, but we did, while we were on the trip to Now Forum in Sydney, Jason McKee, who is on Chuck's team, at one point asked me, why are you sending me all these emails or ephemeral notices? Why not post it in Slack? So in the departure lounge in Fiji, I believe, I wrote the original flow. So there is a designer, there's a flow on here.
And this is what Dave does in Fiji. just to call that out extra special.
Well, I was in Fiji for like 2.5 hours.
I understand, but even if you had been there overnight, you still would have probably chosen to do this. So.
I may have done it on the beach, but I would have still done this. Yes. So I wrote a flow, and so in the travel tracker, let's go ahead and look at this data model. So you have travel groups, and we're going to expose a little bit of. Is this going to expose too much? Maybe.
You've got a webhook there, so yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, you can set up in here a Slack channel. And this team, you set up the Slack channel that you wanted to go to in a webhook. And then you can, in fact, go and say, when anybody in this travel group travels, I want the messages to go here. And so if the Slack channel is defined, it posts it. And so we set up, we have both a standing group for Andrew and myself, and then we also have some like temporary groups. The whole notion of this thing is you'll see this thing down here where it's got a permanent group or a not permanent group. And so it's entirely possible, and in fact, quite probable that you're going to have a group that's kind of ad hoc, right? So, Chuck and Jason and, a few people are going to Australia, but not everyone is. And Lily Lee's going, and, not everybody. And then a different group of people is going to the next thing. And so you can set this up per, and you can get notifications per. And by and large, it worked pretty well. As we were on that whole trip, and then the next trip, we actually, we're kind of fine tuning as we went, and we were realizing sometimes we wouldn't get the notifications, and sometimes we got too many. And so it was troubleshooting the whole way. But we did add that in, and we decided that, for short-term information of short duration, I really like that general strategy, which is going forward, if the information is not relevant for more than, let's say, an hour, I'm not going to send an email ever again, right? I'll send some other form of notification, but I will not send an email. Only if it's something that, is worth forwarding on or is of some kind of reference information. But basically, like the notification of an event, that's going to, Slack or something like that is much more appropriate for that.
A transient thing goes to a transient system, and a more permanent thing goes to email, where it goes to die.
So, we kind of did that. Upcoming work that I still have to do is like right now, this whole system is very itinerary driven, right? Because that's like the unit of transfer.
Yeah.
Forward an itinerary from Concur and everything else, whether that's hotels and et cetera, that comes from the itinerary. But really and truly, other than a delivery mechanism, you can think of it as like a JSON payload, but it's not something that is, in fact, it's harmful once you actually try to deal with it, because now I've got everything so itinerary focused that it's just a pain. And I'm trying to get the itinerary out of the data. I'm trying to factor the data model of my application to not be so itinerary focused. And Andrew had a great idea, which is, why doesn't the Slack notification also say what the next thing is? So rather than itinerary, simplify it down to an agenda. By the way, like your trip could very easily span multiple itineraries, right? My trip from Australia, because I booked a lot of one-way trips. Yeah, you booked them
one at a time, so they were lots and lots of itineraries.
I had 8 itineraries, or something like that, and I didn't care about that. What I cared about was my agenda, which is what thing happens, and then what thing happens, and then is the next thing another flight, or is the next thing a stay at a hotel, or is the next thing going to a car rental place? Like that is also good information for your team to know, is like, what's the next thing I'm doing? I'm going to the car rental place. I'm going to the hotel. And so I'm going to factor that in the coming year. And so that my notification will now include, landed at this flight. Next is the flight, connecting flight. Next is picking up a car or an Uber ride or whatever. So that's
and potentially the next thing for that day for anyone else who has an event that day. Like that actually starts to solve your initial root problem, right?
right.
Is if you just grab everyone's next event when an event happens.
Right. The main right. The thing I want to know is my next event the same as someone else's next event?
Right.
And if so, then there's an economy of scale.
Yes.
Yes.
Then group up everybody.
Yeah, that you can solve, and that should be in the notification. Here's your next event. You're supposed to be at Now Forum London. And by the way, Chuck will be there, and Andrew will be there, and Lily will be. You could list out the FYI part of it because you've already got that data. You know what the next thing is.
Yeah, so that's what I was saying. Is if I land in London, and the next event for Dave is landing in London in 45 minutes, I'm just going to wait for him.
Stick around.
Correct. And then eventually what I want to do is have some smarts in here that, again, the original idea was to look for people with who have similar landing times and similar next destinations, and then send them all notification which says, by the way, do you want to group together on this? You're going from the same airport to the same destination within an hour of each other.
Right.
So whatever mechanism that is, like a schedule job.
So you're really close to being able to actually deliver on that, even though you haven't tried to get there yet.
Yeah. that is the comedy of this particular application. Is that functionality was the very first thing I wanted to do in 2014.
That's a really cool app, and it does lots of cool stuff, but it does not yet solve that. But it very if you move it to that agenda, and then you give that little window of here's the commonalities that are happening soon. It's whenever an event is triggered. That I think that solves it right there. Is it like a little logic for when you're posting that Slack message that my flight arrived. Then you say, okay, there's some commonalities for you coming up right now. Do you want to? And then that in itself is an event, is the user responding to that.
Absolutely.
I think the next step is to take this from an organizational level to potentially a global level. I mean, why couldn't this be part of, say, the community software and let people from around the world know? I mean, you want your customers to work together potentially. Now you could have a social aspect that says, I want to friend Dave and follow Dave. I want to follow Andrew, but I don't necessarily want to follow, these other people. But I want to know when these certain people who don't necessarily work at my organization are going to be at Knowledge or are going to be at Developer Days or something like that would be very cool.
That is a good functionality. It does run into operational issues in the fact that, for example, the travel API that I use is not free. And so, so if I had, say, 100 times the users, then I have 100 times the cost effectively. This will only kind of people on the inside, or I guess if you go to Knowledge, you may get a chuckle out of this. But this project has been going on so long that when I first created the account on this Pay API, the person who gave me the go-ahead to do that was Jonathan Sparks. That's how long we've been. That's how long I've been going at this. All right, so that's pretty much it. So there's still some to-dos on that. I feel good that we got some actual real-world use out of this. What made me feel good is that 2018 was the first year where we really Josh, Nereus, and Brian Barnard and I, when we were the three of us were the developer team, the developer program team, we used it amongst ourselves, but this is the first time where we had kind of ad hoc people coming and going and getting value of it. And
it was great. I used the crap out of this in the last, 4 months at ServiceNow because we did so much travel and with, the variety of people at different events, because sometimes Jason was there and sometimes Dave was there. And so and it kept track of all of that for me, and I didn't have to. And well, that's good for me because I don't remember anything. So
I got to get hooked up. Hook me up.
All right. And in particular, Andrew, wasn't it Amsterdam where you guys were playing Marco Polo in the airport?
Yes. Yes, we did play a little Marco Polo in the airport. Yeah.
But but that was how you guys.
Telling me you're at a bar in an airport is not helpful, by the way. For anyone who's out there in the world.
But they knew that you were in the airport because they all got notifications in their Slack channel.
They knew I was there. They got the event that I was coming, and they waited for me. So the intent of the app was great. The coordination piece struggled.
All right, moving on to like the last big thing that we did this year, and this is going to need definitely some expansion here. The Meetup app that started by Todd Volpe and Alex Steinwachs for the Miami developer meetup. They were the original people. Then it expanded to a larger group. Shimon Klein, Mike Stockman, who is right there with Chuck and Phoenix.
Yep.
All were working on this app with me. Andrew worked on the app with me. And we delivered a really kind of pretty sweet app where our goal was to do as much kind of management of the ServiceNow developer meetup program as possible in instance, because it's one of those judgment calls you have to make, right? Is meetup.com as the thing exists, and it costs money to use the way we're using it. We could duplicate the functionality in ServiceNow, but on the other hand, there's, 500 million people that use Meetup.
Right. You want to capture that audience.
Right. Do we want to boil that particular ocean, or do we want to integrate with that ocean? And we made the decision to integrate with that ocean.
And that is straight in line with the messaging you hear out of John Donahoe's mouth, is we don't want to take over the world and be everything to everyone. We want to work with the applications that specialize in that space and become the orchestrator of those workflows. And this is a perfect example of that.
Yeah. So it makes sense. So, so everything originates in meetup.com, right? You don't schedule anything in ServiceNow, but we want to keep track of everything in here. And in particular, like for the groups that require reimbursement, it was a problem to be solved because it was tough for me to run down all the information I needed, and we had rules, policies to apply, and et cetera, et cetera. And so we did the integration, and this, spanned several episodes through the course of this year. And so over the last month or so, when did we actually put it in production? It was within December, right?
Late
October.
October was when we went live.
Mike,
you're right.
Mike did it. Mike was the first one to do it.
Yep.
Yeah.
October 26th.
But I think either late November or early December is when we made it open to everybody, right?
Absolutely. It was less than 2 weeks ago that we opened it up to everyone. And so,
but it's now more than open to everyone. Now it is a requirement.
Now it's a requirement.
Yeah.
If you want us to pay you back, you must be using the So we're not saying you have to use it, but if you want us to do a reimbursement for you, you must do it through this. We're not taking reimbursements any other way. So we had some problems, particularly with the syncing. And so the syncing was a lot of what I had done. And I went to look, like we saw a couple problems where the very first one, and I think we talked about this on a previous episode, is that we were seeing syncing for only a couple of events, and then it would stop. And as we went and looked in the logs, I saw that that was the whole thing about how it ran faster in production than it did in the PDI, and it ran enough faster that I was hitting rate limiting on the Meetup API. And if they tell you, so they send you a message and says you're consuming APIs too fast.
Yes.
The fifth time they send you that message, they shut you off for an hour, for the day. You have 1 hour and then you time out. And so I was hitting that rate limit every hour. And so there were certain meetups that would get their data, and then certain meetups that would never get data.
So I had what was the workaround?
The workaround was to put a pause in there. And by the way, there's not if you see the pause I put in there, while effective, Andrew has seen the code, and it is the dumbest, stupidest thing in the world. It is literally a busy wait, because there's not a better, I didn't have a better way to do it in there. So conceivably, I may want to architect out the busy wait, which I don't love, but it's in there, so maybe to change to rather than making the syncing such an all or nothing thing, I may want to make each group syncing its own thing, so that instead of syncing any one group, I sync it I create an event and give them all slightly different times, from 1 to 10 minutes in the future or something like that.
This sounds very similar to what Craig Stepp runs into when he's spinning up instances with AWS.
Yeah, you could easily, your job could be the daily job or whatever schedule you want could be go get all the event IDs and create get all the meetup IDs and create events for each one that are, time scale difference. Like that's easily programmable.
Yeah. And that's what I could do.
Scheduling.
Yeah. And that's what I could do is instead of like what I'm doing now is like I check periodically. I have a scheduled job like that runs every 10 minutes and it says, when do I sync? And it has some rules around that. Like when is the last time it's synced and when is the meeting? Like it syncs more the day of the meeting than it does 2 days before the meeting. And it syncs, more 2 days before the meeting than a month before the meeting.
And what is the threshold of that rate API limiting?
I don't remember the exact number, but I do know that it was, I'm not sure exactly what it is.
Like 100 a minute or because I'm wondering, as we get more chapters, is this going to eventually become an issue again?
I think it's the wait that I have now, I think is enough that it will scale because I'm waiting, I think 5 seconds between chapters, and that's enough right now. And I think that would probably if it's enough now, I think it'll continue to be enough as it, if the duration of the syncing was twice as long, I think it's still enough of a pause to keep it. But the reason that we're doing it the way we did is because, like at the time I ran into the problem, it's one of those ones where I know for a fact the way I'm solving this problem is not optimal. However, I'd really like to have this problem solved in the next 20 minutes.
Yes.
Do they have webhooks available?
I don't know.
That might be a way to address it as well. I mean, if somebody signs up, hey, there's a webhook. We get information. At least we'd get an event to say, let's go refresh this. Or that way you'd only be refreshing it on demand.
Yeah, that would be preferable as a webhook for like the RSVPs from the meetup side. But
yes,
I don't know if they have that. I have not looked.
Yeah, I haven't either. And if they do have that would actually be preferable for, so then what we would do is we would pull out the RSVP syncing and we would just have the webhook, and that would be better, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then the other thing that I found, so I fixed that. And so, that kept me from dying in the middle of a sync. But then I saw a similar type problem. I'm like, where it would sync and then it would stop. And I went and I looked and there was a null pointer error in the middle of the sync runs. And what I realized is that sometimes you might go to meetup.com and cancel a meetup. And now you've got a record over here that has a meetup ID and it's trying to sync. And it was there was not an error. There was not a condition to say, what if I get nothing back from this call? Because that's just not I just hadn't really considered that case, is that sometimes this is going to return nothing from this call to get me the information about it. So what I'm doing now is I'm intercepting the case where the response is not 200, which is also what the API does. I think it's weird. It's not a 404, which you think it would be, but it's like a 402 or something weird. Or conceivably, it's even a 200 with a weird code in the body of it. I remember it being not exactly what I would have expected. So now if a meeting is canceled, I actually catch that and I just delete the meeting over here.
Okay.
So we're no longer dying in the middle of it. And I actually had a couple iterations, one of which was I just caught that error so it would continue syncing. And then about a day later, I went back and said, well, there's no
reason. You want to take the last 2 minutes or so and just like walk through the use of the app? And then we could even like just cut that in the future and use that as our demo.
Walk through the use of the check-in.
Yeah, like
absolutely.
Check-in and then yeah.
Yeah, and there was a bunch of little UI changes. I think we're going to see that the deli is the only option because it's the only one that's upcoming.
Yeah.
And so when you do this, and I'm not too worried too much about leaking information because it's all public information up on Meetup.
It's all on Meetup anyway.
So when you go through, So you can go and check in. And so the basic idea is that you're, looking at your RSVP list. And of course, Deli being Deli, I think they scheduled this like a week ago, and they got a bunch of people. So then as somebody comes in and you say, oh, I'm Akash Sharma, and you check in. And I've added this. I don't know that we have ever showed this on Live Coding Happy Hour, but you can now undo the check-in, which was kind of a little unpleasant before.
That was a request from me. I appreciate it.
You tapped the wrong one.
Yes,
tapped the wrong one, and then you could fix it, but you had to go back to back over here to the data and change it.
I could fix it, but a regular
right
organizer couldn't have fixed that.
And so this is just basically all that you do. And if you had somebody that shows up, like let's say I'm there and I had an RSVP'd, you can do.
It's not responsive.
What do you mean it's not responsive? Oh, it's not. I don't have a look ahead. I could, but I don't. I have not gone back through.
There's 3 Dave Slushers.
I actually do have 2 different. There are 2 different.
He's got accounts. 2 Meetup accounts, and then someone else made that third one. Hilarious.
When we created that fake Chicago meetup, that was our integration test. Somebody made me this fake account. I'm thinking Earl Duke by the Photoshop job because it has Earl's fingerprints on it.
It's got some fingerprints of Earl, but I'm not certain it was him.
But it's like if I did a less granular search, it would be I could search on just Dave, and you'll notice that it goes to the top of the top of the list, and then once you exhaust the
Dave's
search,
you go back to the
regular list.
Oh, that's cool. Okay.
There was some angular, some angular jiggery pokery, because also you might turn up somebody who was in this list before, and then you don't want them up in the list twice. And, so there's I'm actually fiddling with this array as I'm inserting those search results. If you turn up somebody who's in there below, you actually take them out of the array from down here. So they're only in the list one time.
Yeah, so it's pretty straightforward check-in app. You just say, I'm here, or do the people or not, and if they have a guest, you put it. So the check-in process is, as you could imagine, we want to be as easy as possible. Just click if you're here.
And you can also hide the checked-in, so if you got half and half and you want to make it easier to find the people who have yet to check in, you can hide people as they check in.
That's cool.
And then what happens after the event is actually done, and if they're getting a reimbursement, because we help a little contribution to these events, it gets the number of users and applies our rules to it, to whatever they request, and if it exceeds the rules, it parses it down to just what we are going to allow for the number of folks that are there. And the thing it solved for Dave and I, and now just me, is that getting their reimbursement method, the receipt, and the number of folks and how much they're asking for all together in the same place.
And the state of it, by the way.
And the state of the reimbursement was a nightmare of many, 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 many emails.
Like even the question of, have I paid this yet?
Yeah.
I have 17 open ones, and I've paid 6. Which 6 have I paid, and which 11 do I still need to pay? That was
I just added a new state to that table, which was I paid them, and I've done my internal ServiceNow card expensing for it, so that it clears on the purchase card as well. So then I know which ones have both been paid and have been cleared off my card, so it filters the list nicely for me. So
and again, a very, very realistic use case example of how the process worked fine when we had 4 chapters. Now we're up to 50.
Yeah.
And we needed to put an app with a process with some automation in place to scale, because it's just not going to work. And as customers see this in their organizations, going, well, this spreadsheet was fine for 2 people, but now we have 12.
It's exactly like that safety app example we used in the workshops this fall. that safety manager, his company quadrupled in size. He needs something better than what he had before.
Yep.
Let's turn that spreadsheet into an app.
Yeah, and when we tell people, when we go and we kind of preach the gospel of ServiceNow development, and we say if you're looking for a first app to consider doing this with, then this is exactly the kind of problem. It's a data-driven problem that has states, that has transitions, that has a flow, that has rules, and has logic behind it. And so it's exactly kind of the thing that it's our kind of problem to solve.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And more important than that, it's a real problem that we care about, that we realize value from as soon as it's live.
It's exactly the same thing that happened with the Tech Now series. Like, oh man, I got to coordinate with a lot of people, and there's a lot of tasks involved here. Even the community live stream. You think I just turn on the camera and go, but no, there's pre-work, there's post-work. Like, hey man, I want to automate this because I want making content to still be fun. It's not fun when you got to do all this other administrative garbage.
Absolutely. So like when we tell people, use the system, solve your own problem. Like the very best problem to solve is the one that you are feeling pain from today.
Yeah.
And this is exactly a case of that. We are
within the three walls of your cubicle and go out from there.
Yes. So anyway, that's our end of the year wrap up. I have not. I've been sharing. I have not looked at the chat. Do we have any questions or comments? Or
we don't have it. So the Jared likes the refresh faster, closer to the meeting. He he was like, yeah, that's sensible.
Good, yeah.
So yeah, we I liked doing that as well. The webhook is obviously an improvement.
We gotta check into that.
Is if they have that. We still don't have a camera from you, Dave. If you're trying,
I did try to start the video. Okay,
hey, there you are. Look at that.
Look at that. All right. So
it's now nighttime here in North Carolina. In case you missed it.
Yeah, it's exactly the same behind me as it has been. All right, so let's go around the horn. Andrew, how's your very bad elf treating you?
My very bad elf has got a hilarious name, and it is very cute, but it's a 325.
Ooh.
It's not great. I've had better from this brewer.
Okay.
The other choices, I would choose a different one from them next time.
All right, Chuck.
I'm giving the Leinenkugel's original beer a solid 3.5. Good beer anytime, summer, winter, fall. If you're looking for something that's more flavorful than your generic large brewery companies, that's a good one to go for.
So you spent most of your adult life up around there somewhere. I don't think I've ever worn it on Live Coding Happy Hour, but I have a Point shirt that says
Point was an hour away. In fact, Craig Stepp has a great story about when I was in transition between my old company and ServiceNow. There were about 3 weeks. I cleaned out my basement and I went on an e-cycling trip, and Stevens Point was the nearest place to dump all my computers. I loaded up the minivan from stem to stern, roof to floor. It was packed with old stuff. I drove an hour out to Stevens Point, gave them the recycling stuff. I got maybe $30 in revenue for it. And right across the street, coincidentally, was the Stevens Point Brewing. So I picked this up, and I'm telling this story, and Craig says, so you're unemployed and you're cashing in stuff, you're recycling for beer. Oh, wait, no, that's not quite how the story was supposed to go.
That's exactly how the story went.
When you ripped on Dave for Fiji, I'm like, you and Craig, man, you're cut from the same cloth.
Here's the reason that a kid who grew up in Kansas and then moved to Georgia knows about Stevens Point at all is because I used to read Badger comic books, and he would always talk about Point beer, and I didn't even know it was a real beer until much later, because it's set in Wisconsin. And I was like, huh. And I was like, what's this magical Point beer? And when I found out that was a real thing, I have to try me some Point. It was for cheap beer. It's pretty tasty.
Yeah, it is.
So anyway,
Highway 10 from where I lived.
All right. My Highland Brewing Gaelic Ale from not very far from where Andrew is. I'm kind of with you, Andrew. I did not love this. I'm going to give it a 3.5. It was okay. Right. It wasn't great. But I think I have had better from Highland Brewing myself. So
yeah, Highland's got some excellent beers.
So all right, with that, thank you everybody for watching. Thank you everybody who watches later. And no Live Coding Happy Hour next week. I think the week out, The next week is up to Andrew.
That'll be up to me, which I'll probably do one, but I'm not committing to it at this point. But yeah, the next show will definitely be next year. We've had an exciting year here at ServiceNow. We're looking forward to Madrid coming out next quarter. So
A lot of good stuff coming in Madrid.
We'll definitely be playing with some of those toys very soon on the live streams here, into the next year, and showing off some of the new capabilities and adding them into things that we care about, because like the waiting is one of those things that we're looking for a way to do that easily in the next version.
Yes, even the workflow doesn't do it to my satisfaction now, which is, by the way, why some of my travel tracker things, I realized at some point the default transition, because it would wait 12 hours and then see if it's time to go get an ID.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't change it, the default is 100 transitions, and then the workflow shuts down.
I'm out.
So I was like, why do some of these things just die in the middle? And then I realized it's because that's too low.
I think everybody has hit that configuration thing at some point.
And really what I want to do is I want to say one time, wait until 2 days before this point. Yep. 48 hours before this time, wake back up. That's the only thing I want to do. I want to wait until a specific time, which
timer
is
activity.
The
timer activity.
The timer activity only wakes up if there's a change in the record.
No. Oh, no. You can tell it to wait for us. Remember we did the event thing.
Okay.
You can even do a relative time to like a
relative
record time.
So I could say, I would do the math myself and say, wait for 37 days right now, starting now.
Well, no, you say two days before my target time.
Then it will move on. It'll just hold in that spot in the workflow. Timer activity will do. We did that for the Meetup app. We did live coding at Knowledge 2017.
Okay. I will have to re-examine that. So,
Yep.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks everyone. It's been great 2018. See you next year.
It was my present to me to get Andrew aboard. So thank you for that, Andrew. All right. Thanks, everybody. And we'll see you next year. Bye.